He's running for re-election, and he's joining us here on the Potomac Local Podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Uriah Kiser, publisher and founder of Potomac Local News. Joining us today is Delegate Paul Milde from the 64th District in Stafford County. Delegate Milde, thanks for coming on with us.
Uriah, thank you for having me.
Well, you made some announcements, and before we get into them, we're going to tell everybody what we always tell them is please like, subscribe, and share this video so you see more local news content in your feed, and so you can learn more and your neighbors can learn more about Delegate Milde and what he's done to serve the citizens of Stafford County and the Fredericksburg region. Delegate Milde, you and I, we go way back. You were on the Stafford Board of County Supervisors when I first became a newspaper reporter, and I've seen you go from service on that board to now in Richmond. You've had quite the journey in terms of your representation of the Fredericksburg region, Stafford County, and now you're running for re-election to your seat in the 64th district. This would make a second term for you should you get reelected. And it's you are like, it's a tight district. I was looking at some of the numbers, and I think Trump won the district, by 2 points in 2024. So it's a very tight district. And just to the north, you have a sea of blue. It's very Democratic. And then, obviously south of your district, just south of your district, you have a Democrat representing Fredericksburg City and a portion of Spotsylvania County, and that's Delegate Joshua Cole. So I don't want to say an island, but you kind of are. So let's talk about, I know I threw a lot out there, but you're running for re-election, and it's a very contentious district. What's the thought process there?
Oh, so there's a lot there. Yeah. I was on the board for 12 years. It's a great background to have as a delegate, and it really is. There's so much that we do that affects the local governments. I do have an island, but as poorly as Trump did, and Derek Anderson also only carried it by 3 points. I won it by over 9 points just a year and a half ago. I'd like to think that has to do a little bit with my history in the county, and just a lot of door knocking, a lot of working on constituent issues. I hope I get some crossover vote. So I am hoping, gosh, I hope that people don't look at me as vulnerable, because that means that I'm going to be attracting opposition. But either way, I feel pretty comfortable. I'm positioned well to win in either a primary or a general election. Nothing is for sure. And of course, a year into this job, you are just figuring things out. Everyone says I have more work to do. That's the standard line when you're running for re-election. But truly, after 1 year in the General Assembly, you just need more time. It takes more than 2 years. Whoever did that, I'm sure there was a lot of wisdom behind it, not having professional politicians. But I'm getting some traction on things. I'm looking forward to making more progress.
So it's interesting because you have, so you're running on your platform of bringing more transportation funding into the Fredericksburg district, into this area. And so just south of, just a quick explainer, just being located just south of Northern Virginia, where there is already a transportation authority and more funding put into place and what have you. Fredericksburg has been arguing for years about whether to set up a similar regional transportation authority, but yet whether they do or not, the funding need is still there for these transit projects, transportation. I think the cool word now is mobility, I think is what they're calling it now.
Yeah.
So you're running on that platform. And the other thing too is kind of what we're seeing, and we talk a lot about data centers, because data centers are popping up all over the place. And we're seeing, especially in Northern Virginia, we're seeing Democrats who traditionally have argued for preservation and, the environment. They're actually going forward these large server farms that are dotting the landscape and taking up hundreds of acres. And we're seeing Republicans kind of say, wait, no, let's roll back and conserve the land, the remaining pieces of land that we have. And you're one of those Republicans on the crow's nest side. You have been very active in preserving what is a beautiful nature preserve in Stafford County, Crow's Nest. So before anybody thinks that, you're one of those Republicans who only think about business or, what have you, money, you've actually been really active for a very long time. I think I covered you when Governor Kane was, when he was governor, and he came by helicopter to Crow's Nest on a project that you were working on to preserve that tract of land.
Yeah, I led the efforts on that. It's a team effort, but it was my lead in my district. And we saved, it's up to 400,000 acres. I mean, excuse me, 4,000 acres out of the 225,000 acres of the county. The other programs that I put into place as the lead were the purchase of development rights and the transfer of development rights programs. And those have resulted in several thousand more acres being saved adjacent to the Crow's Nest and all over Stafford County. There was no conservation-minded thing going on in Stafford when I got there. And back on the data centers, there's a way to balance all this out. The tax revenue that comes off of data centers is attractive, and this can be worked out. Data centers are going to go somewhere. The problem with Loudoun, of course, is they allowed just an explosion in development. That's the story of Loudoun County. That's what changed Loudoun County. It wasn't server farms. That's the new problem, and one that has to be addressed. And Ian is definitely on top of it.
When
But
you say Ian Lovejoy, we
yeah.
talked to Ian on our podcast earlier this week, and he's got some bills in there addressing data centers, because as we've seen, the data centers have just Prince William County, just north of Stafford, is set to become ground zero for data center development, overtaking Loudoun County, which had been the #1 spot for data centers across the globe, the #1 in the world, and Prince William is about to overtake that. And we've seen those data centers come south to Stafford, and now we're looking at Fredericksburg is looking at getting their first one next to the baseball stadium where the Fred Nats play, Spotsy, Caroline. So you don't have I'm looking at your legislation because I want to get into that. Session starts, a belated starting session on Monday, the water problems that we've seen in Richmond, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how a city the size of Richmond that has road signs directing it for hundreds of miles from different states to come here, and they have no water. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. But at any rate, I don't see a lot in the way of data centers on your legislative package here, but I do see some things that we've been talking about, and one of those is it's interesting, this telework by local government employees. So we're hearing that Trump wants all the federal employees back in the office, and he's going to make a push for that. So, does your bill say that local government should be able to do more telework, or are you looking to just make it a more stringent, put some rules to it? This telework by local government, explain that for me.
So this initiative has nothing to do with the Trump initiative. It's just it is a coincidence. I own a business. I own a pretty large business, about 30 people full time, and anyone running a business knows that your productivity usually isn't as high with a lot of telework. We figured that out during COVID. Governor Youngkin 3 years ago issued an executive order that put Virginia employees back to work. This is just basically extends it to the localities, the cities and the towns and the counties, so that those employees would have to have permission from a department head to work one day, and it's a plan, has to be a plan and an application to work one day up to 1 day a week. After that, 2 days a week, it's a little bit higher threshold, and anything over 2 requires the council, the board of supervisors, to sign off on it. We need to get people back in the office. This is taxpayers' money that's being spent on their salaries and their pay, and it needs to be managed like someone would manage a company of their own, and you would not let people work from home that often. There are the rare cases where people can be just as productive, but it's very hard to quantify. It's hard to get people together in teams, especially in the building code sections of a department. You need people working together.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just want to come back together. I think, at least for a couple days a week, especially the ones that like, sort of went all in on telework, and they're finding that, the mobile thing was fun at first, but they want to get back together and see their coworkers and exchange ideas in person. I want to switch gears, and one of the things that we have seen over the course of the past few years, and going back at least 5 years, is um, uh, we've seen the word I'm looking for is pedestrians who are in the on the stands in the meeting the roadway, and they're begging for money, they're begging for food, they're begging for all kinds of things, and it has become a problem in the localities that had simply said, and this was after some Supreme Court decision, I forget which one it was, but essentially said, listen, the Supreme Court told the police you can't stop them from exercising their First Amendment rights. They're standing in the meeting, they're holding a sign. If they're not, quote unquote, I guess bugging you or directly talking with you, um, then you really can't do anything about it. And so the law enforcement in some of the parts of the region have stepped back from enforcing that, even though they may in fact be asking directly for money or food or what have you. And it got to the point where in 2024, Prince William County was actually working on a program to pay them not to stand in the median and not to beg for various things. And some of these exchanges that we've seen along these medians have unfortunately become violent. We've seen some people get hurt, then they're probably asking from what police tell us, they're probably asking for for drugs or money or more than just food or or a couple bucks. Your bill would increase would put a fine there, and it would prohibit anything from being exchanged between a pedestrian on the road and someone in a car.
Correct. With some logical exceptions. This, aside from the fact that this is not a kind of an activity or job, if you will, that will gives anyone dignity or self-respect, and it's becoming more and more of a way of life for homeless, mostly homeless, and actually a lot of them aren't homeless, but many. That's not the point of this bill. This is a safety and really a traffic flow issue. Um, it defies common sense. To think that this does not slow down traffic and it's not a safety issue. We could still write tickets for jaywalking, as far as I know, and if we can do that, then we shouldn't have people interacting with traffic, making it hard to get through a traffic intersection. And of course, the idea that motor vehicles that are moving and when there's a green light and they're still stuck in between a row of cars, it's just a safety issue. So I hope, and this enables localities to pass those laws. Some localities have done something like this, and a lot of them don't. Prince William County is an example, Stafford County, because the attorneys there tell the board that they're not sure they have the right to do it. I want the General Assembly to tell the counties and the cities they have the right, the enabling legislation to pass these laws. And it doesn't, they can restrict it or ban it. It gives them a chance to kind of work. If they want to do something in between, they can do that. But it's gotten out of control, and anyone that doesn't see that, I don't understand. By the way, I polled the issue. It polls off the charts. Nobody seems to be okay with it. Very few people think that it's what they want in their community.
Now, one of the things that I have noticed, and that my wife and I were in the car, we comment on it, is that we also see fundraising groups that will stand in the median, and they're having a car wash or a bake sale, and they're trying to get your attention to pull over into the parking lot of the grocery store where there's all where they're set up. So, I mean, you said there are some exceptions. I mean, is that an
That's not one
exception?
of them. You're
That's
right.
not one of them. Okay.
No, because that wouldn't be fair, and it's unfortunate that we have to and the hardest one, of course, are the firemen. They would fill the boot. They don't do it that often anymore in Stafford, but it's before you know it, and it happens in Stafford. You have organizations that come out all the time in the summer and stand on the corners, and again, they're in the middle of traffic,
Yeah.
and we want to help, but this is just not. It defies common sense. It's why it's a new problem, like so many things that seem to defy common sense that we have to live with now. I just hope that the General Assembly sees it the way the rest of us do.
I don't know how many times we have said, my wife and I, all it would take is for one of the and their kids, the ones that we see doing the fundraisers, just to trip on a shoelace, or just to just something awful happen and they'd fall into traffic, and we see them on like 610, the 6-lane road, and people are, posted speed limit's 35, but come on, it's all, we don't want to see that, and thankfully we haven't seen that. At least to my knowledge, we haven't seen that. I wanted to call that one out because I think that we've done a lot of reporting on that, and these are the things that we can see right in the community. Some of the things that we don't see, but you have been on again going back. That's why I brought up Crow's Nest. You have been all over land use and development, and so you have some bills in here about cash proffers, building permits, site plans, tax incremental funding. All of this is important stuff, but it's sort of, again, it's not the things that we see when we're driving down the street. So sort of, yeah. I guess you're right. You could, but we don't deal with it a lot. So tell me why you put in these bills and why they're important to you.
Well, the last one you mentioned was the tax incremental financing, called TIF. That is a current law. It's been around forever, or where a county or city can forgive up to a portion of, or all of property tax, real estate tax revenue, for 20 years being generated as a result of a new development, something of a renovation. This is for blighted areas. Aquia Town Center Mall is what's left of it is a perfect example of a development that needs something to kickstart it. That it's not financially feasible for the owners to make the investment there to redevelop that mall. And even if you give them back some of their tax revenue that they'll create, they take a $20 million property and they make it a $100 million property, that new tax on that $80 million delta, you can forgive part of that or all of that. This just extends that current law to every other kind of tax that might be collected off that development. Transient occupancy tax for hotels, car rental tax, 1% of the sales tax that is the local portion, even water and sewer hookup fees. It just makes the tool broader and gives the county or city the ability to give back more of that to incentivize redevelopment of a bad area. And Prince William County has a ton of areas like that too, but Stafford has a few of its own. I'm sure they exist everywhere.
You used the Quiet Town Center as the example, and we've written so much about that over the past 10, 15 years. And I can imagine that would be great for the Mosaic Corp that owns that property and has for years tried to do something there with the Harris Teeter and some, they need an anchor store, but nothing has really materialized. And they've gone back and forth. When you were on the board of supervisors, you guys struck a deal. It didn't work out the way that I thought it was, and it still is. It's basically a plot of land with some different uses there, but it's nothing like it used to be. I can imagine that this is a good thing for the Mosaic Corp, like I said, who owns that plot of land. But then the pushback I can imagine is from local government, and we say, well, listen, you're taking money out of our pocket because we would use that money to fund our services, and you're giving it back to them. So, do you anticipate pushback from local governments on this bill that say, listen, we like the idea of development, but we don't want to lose any local tax funding in that. So where's the balance?
I actually think I'll see some support from VACO and the counties because it's an option they have. They don't have to use it. And I'll remind you again, you're not losing right now at Aquia Town Center. We can play this out. We've been looking at that now, that dump for 10 or 15 years since they've torn down all the buildings, 15 years. And there has been no new tax generated or tax revenue generated there because there's been no new development there. If we had redeveloped that mall and given them a break on their new taxes, we'd now be collecting close to or collecting the full amount of the taxes based on of that redevelopment. So it's just a way you're not losing any tax revenue. The argument I hear against it is, what about people that are building on a green field further out down 610? Is it fair that Walmart doesn't get a break on their new Walmart store in the Rock Hill district? That was several years ago. Instead, but we do, we allow the incremental forgiveness of taxes on the new development somewhere somewhere else. And in this case, it's for blighted areas. It just has to be an area that meets the definition in the code of blighted.
Yeah, and it might be a way to stave off another data center because you could.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, we're so used to seeing those things pop up and these things being rezoned, and so if retail and shopping and conveniences are what people want, and every survey that we report on always says that we want a Trader Joe's, we want a another coffee shop, we want a place where you can walk and shop and talk and play, and this might be a way to get there, especially at some of these blighted areas. And as you said, they're all up and down the Route 1 corridor, from Woodbridge down to Stafford and Aquia Town Center. We'll be watching that one.
How else do we help Uriah? I mean, that's the question that we always, politicians talk about bringing in retail opportunities, but give me an idea there are no other tools. It's money. And so how do we find a way that's fair to help them come? Otherwise, they're just looking at the demographics and the numbers, and we're not making the cut at Aquia Town Center.
Yeah, and we talked to I believe is Sodi. We talked to him back in December, and because I think there's a new Starbucks or a new development coming into the old Carlos O'Kelly's there. And what he told us is that he just cannot get anything done there, and he's very downtrodden about the whole situation. And so maybe this, like I said earlier, this might be good for them as they continue to try to get something going there, because I think everybody wants something there. Because you have that Aquia Harbor area right behind there, and for many years before Stafford Marketplace was built, which is now the most successful retail establishment in Stafford County in history, Aquia Town Center was it. Yeah, that was the grocery store. That was where the coffee shop was. There were restaurants there, and so I think people, those who have been around a while, remember that and still want something there. So hopefully we can get that moving. Delegate Milde, hey, listen, I've taken up way too much of your time, but I certainly appreciate you coming on and talking to us about your reelection and what's happening in session. I hope that you'll come back on with us during session if you get a minute, and update us and let people know how they can support your efforts and track what you're working on down there in Richmond.
Happy to, always.